For millions of years, Earth has been this incredible cradle of life. It has survived countless challenges and some catastrophes as well. As humans, we like to fantasize about a meteor falling from the sky and killing us all, but the joke might be on us, because we might be the meteor all along. So now only one question remains. What comes next? What comes after humanity has perished? Well, that's exactly what we are going to be talking about today. It is no shocker to anyone that as a kid I consumed a lot of science docs or science media in general. Just to throw in some CGI animals on top of realistic scenarios with some expert commentary and my baby brain is hooked. One day, as a kid, I was flipping through the TV channels and I came across this documentary that seared a memory into my brain in such a way that more than a decade later I still remember it vividly and I am making a video about it. The Future is Wild is a documentary / mini-series from 2002 that takes a wild guess, pun intended, wink wink, onto a speculative future millions of years from now, where we get to see Earth itself as well as its inhabitants evolve in many different unique ways, taking in considerations predictions made by the scientists and specialists at the time. We are talking about RGB squids as well as snails hopping like kangaroos. Yeah, the future seems to be pretty wild for sure. This is gonna take a while to edit, and maybe the reason why it's taking so long to release this video. At least it will look nice! Fuck. Although the documentary premiered in 2002, its origins can be traced to a much earlier work, the book After Men by Dougal Dixon. Now, if you never heard of Dixon before, buckle up, because he is a geologist with a great interest in paleontology. Now, if that sounds fancy to you, do not be alarmed, because it's just how grown-ups say, I really like dinosaurs. So, as a 24-year-old boomer myself, I can say I too have a huge interest in paleontology. I am what you would call an enthusiast. Dixon wrote all sorts of visual guides, most of them aimed at children, but I believe he is more known for his more mature stuff. Take The New Dinosaurs for instance, a speculative take on how dinosaurs could continue to evolve if they never went extinct. Or Man After Man, an absolute book of horrors that explores a future millions of years from now, where humans and human-machine hybrids could continue to evolve past extreme climate changes. When I say book of horrors, I am actually underplaying it a lot. Just look at some of these human descendants. I'm so glad I'm gonna be dead by then. By the way, I did try getting a copy of Man After Man for a future video, but the problem is it was only printed once. Probably for a good reason. But because it was only printed once, now it is considered to be a collector's item. So getting a copy of one will set me back a huge doubloon. So maybe in the future, who knows? I am struggling. But going back to After Man, it was published in 1991 and it explores a future millions of years from now, where humans and a lot of other Earth species had gone extinct and how this influenced evolution at a global scale. The book is more about having fun with the possibilities rather than predicting the future outright, but it does offer a fun and interesting window into a speculative future with a lot of new and interesting new species. Like this terrestrial predatory bat. There's a statue of it, and I need it. I need it for a thing. I think it will look very cool, like right about there, like in the corner. Believing it or not, the book was a global success, so much so that DreamWorks, from Shrek fame, bought the rights to it, but never really produced anything with the IP. A stop-motion animation was also developed in Japan, as well as an anime adaptation of all things. But when I started investigating about this mysterious anime adaptation, I went down a rabbit hole that deserves an entire video of its own. But long story short, now it is considered to be lost media, and I even found myself in Japanese forums also looking for this. So if you guys want me to make an entire video about the Man After Man anime adaptation, please let me know down there in the comments. I would love to investigate more about it, and watch it actually. All I could find was this intro and a few print screens, so there is that. A few years later, DreamWorks was approached by Discovery to produce a TV show adaptation of After Man, but DreamWorks refused. Nah, we good I guess. So Discovery went on with Dougal Dixon to create their own history of the future with The Future is Wild, set in different time frames so it doesn't really interfere with the continuity pre-established by After Man. If there's something we all learned with MatPat, is that you should never mess up the continuity. Also, MatPat, we miss you. Besides Dixon, 16 other experts in different fields like biology, botany, paleontology, geology, and so on worked as consultants to make sure the science presented in the show was as plausible or as close to plausible as possible. Just look at some of these absolute characters, in particularly this one. I don't know how to describe it, but you can tell he is a botanist. And also Professor William Gilly. Now, if you don't know who Professor Gilly is, I don't blame you, but also, he is probably the guy behind every cool cephalopod discovery ever, or at least he has something to say about them. Seriously, this guy has a serious cephalopod obsession, so much so that he dedicated his entire life to squids. Also, remember this for later, it will come up again. Besides After Man, The Future is Wild also draws clear inspiration from other properties, like Walking with Dinosaurs, for example, something we covered before here on the channel. It mixes segments with expert commentary and CGI animals on top of realistic scenarios, giving it that very authentic nature documentary feel. Now, before getting really into it, I gotta give you a disclaimer, the show can get pretty nerdy at times and requires some basic understanding of biology, more specifically when it comes to evolution and convergent evolution. So, if you skipped biology class, first of all, cringe, second, shame. Third, I made a video around a year ago where I talk about evolution as well as convergent evolution in a very simplified and easy to digest way. But fair warning, it is quite old and kinda rough. One would say it is actually kinda bad, but it will get you up to speed. So, if you skipped biology class, go there and watch it, I'll be here waiting. Yeah, it would look pretty cool like right about here. Oh, you're back! So, have you done your homework, Michael? Good, let's keep going. The series spans for 13 episodes total, divided in 3 main arcs. Across all of them, we'll get to see not only how animals evolved, but also how Earth itself changed due to the gradual continental shift. So, with no further ado, let's jump in and see if the future gets as wild as advertised. The first arc in the series takes us 5 million years into the future, where Earth is deep into an ice age. Over the span of 4 episodes, we get to know a planet mostly covered in ice, with some continents colliding, closing off smaller seas like the Mediterranean. We also meet some wild creatures like this gannet whale, a penguin the size of a whale that has taken over the niche left by the now extinct cetaceans. A perfect example of convergent evolution, don't you think, Michael? Then there's the shagrat, a giant rodent with a questionable name. Spoiler alert, he won't be doing much shagging unless you count getting eaten by the Snowstalker, a bear-sized wolverine, as shagging. Naturally, in an ice age, the world isn't fully covered in ice. In the place of the old Amazon rainforest, we have a grassy savanna, where these giant predatory bats took on the niche left by the birds of prey. They are called the Death Cleaners. Seriously, these names, man. And let's not forget about the Kara Killer, basically Terrorbird the sequel. He hunts down these primates with bright blue butt cheeks called the Babukari, distant relatives of today's baboons. Due to its proximity to our own time, the first arc is inherently a bit less interesting than the arcs that follows. Although very cool, all the animals presented in the first arc are very similar to their counterparts present in our current time. I mean, 5 million years sounds like an eternity, but in evolutionary terms, it is pretty short. To put it into perspective, we are closer to the T-Rex than the T-Rex was to the Stegosaurus. Let that sink in. Although a little bit less wild, the first arc does give us a solid taste of the science moving forward and sets the stage for things to come. So, let's go a bit further and see how wild the future can really get. The second arc takes us 100 million years into the future, quite a big jump from the 5 million, and this is where things start getting interesting. We get to see the aftermath of the ice melting. Earth is mostly covered in water now, and even land is covered in large bodies of water like rivers and lakes. So, the planet has basically become a big swamp. Enter the Swampus, a cephalopod that's living that amphibious lifestyle. It is aquatic, but can crawl onto land much like a mud skipper, which comes in handy when avoiding its number one enemy, the lurkfish. The lurkfish is a distant relative of the electric eel, capable of one-shotting its prey with a 1000-volt shock. Dash hurdy.
But a swampus can defend itself.
Holy shit! Yeah, the Swampus is somewhat venomous, but let me tell you, the Swampus got lucky here, because it was only a baby. Wanna see how an adult looks like?
The adults are enormous, the biggest animals that have ever walked on the face of the planet. 120 tons. That's bigger than even the biggest dinosaur.
Oh hell yeah! Now, the show never really addresses what happens to humans, it just vaguely mentions that they are living somewhere in outer space, maybe, we don't know. And in the second arc, we are introduced to the Poggle, the last mammal standing. His life is absolute shit. He basically survives by stealing the seeds these spiders are harvesting. And I can't really decide if he is cute or straight up nightmare fuel, but here is where the plot twists itself. The spiders are actually collecting the seeds to lure in the Poggle so they can feed them to their queen. I guess Spider Mommy has to eat as well. Something tells me the Poggle won't be the savior mammals need. But hey, to make sure you gotta go even further. Maybe Poggle gets its shit together, who knows? Nope. No mammals. But things are getting quite interesting. It seems like the further we go, the wilder it gets. We are now 200 million years into the future. In this new world, everything we know has hit the reset button. It takes place after a mass extinction event, and the continents have fused together, giving origin to Pangea 2, Return of the King. Mammals, fish, birds... You better be speaking caveman, because that's ancient history now. Instead of fish, we got the flesh. That's the actual name.
Flish, as the name suggests, have evolved from fish.
Fish have taken over the role left by birds, hanging out by the ocean like seagulls or in tropical forests. Writing flesh in the script was a nightmare, because every time I wrote flesh, the autocorrect would change it to flush. This has nothing to do with the video, I just found it funny, and I decided to share it. Due to the lack of predators, plankton has grown to scary sizes like, excuse me? I mean, cetaceans were extinct 100 million years ago, so... And sharks are the only fish around. After 620 million years of patch notes, they finally got Wi-Fi and bioluminescence. Well, they didn't change much, but you can't really improve on perfection. Meanwhile, on land, we have the Terabyte, a distant cousin of the Thermite that has evolved chemical weapons. It shoots acid out of its butt. They have a little cannon on top of their body that shoots out acid. Okay, I guess. But believe me when I say, it gets wilder. Enter William Gilly from the beginning of the video. William, can I call you Billy? Billy Gilly, your cephalopod obsession has finally paid off. Cephalopods have finally replaced mammals as the dominant class, giving us RGB squids in the ocean. Very cool, I must say, but that's just the beginning. There's the squibbin, a tree-dwelling squid that has taken over the niche left by monkeys. These guys are pulling off all sorts of tricks, pins and shit straight out of Pro Skater 3. But this man's questionable desires know no bounds. Bigger than any other animal on Earth today, with 8 legs, 8 tons, and 8 meters tall, the appropriately named Mega Squid is toppling trees like it's nothing. It eats whatever it can snatch with its tentacles. And at one point it tries to eat this orange goo. Bad move. The orange goo behaves much like one of those parasitic fungi like cordyceps or parasites like the Leucochloridium. I won't show footage of any of those two because it might be too much for some viewers. But if you played The Last of Us or watched the show, you know pretty much what I'm talking about. And just when things look pretty bleak for our mega protagonist, he whips out his ultimate move. You see that little circle on its forehead? That's basically a frog vocal sack but on steroids. Straight up a built-in speaker that gives him the power of bass boost that he uses to squirt the orange goo everywhere, all over the forest. You just know William Gilly clears his search history every night. Oh shit, the Mega Squid snatched this baby squibbin, but it's okay, because the baby squibbin's family pulls out this rescue plan to save the baby. They manage to save the baby, but the Mega Squid runs away to cause trouble another day. It rhymed. The episode wraps up with William Gilly giving us the moral of the story.
If there's going to be continued development of further intelligence after 200 million years, I certainly believe it will be the cephalopods. A creature like a squibbin is just following through on 3 billion years of evolution of cephalopods making bigger and better brains.
Humanity is gone and nature is healing, and probably the next dominant species will be big brain squids. And with 9 of them, who am I to disagree? Sometimes it does weird me out in a heartwarming way watching these college professor level charisma doctors geeking over these fictional animals as if they were going to exist someday. They will not. However, it is weird in a very heartwarming way. It is clear that this is the most fun they had in years. And yeah, some of the animals presented in the show are arguably goofy or a bit outlandish. But we are all laughing together. The Future is Wild has the same vibe as that school project you made with your equally mentally ill friends. It is a blast to watch and it's clear it's a passion project. So watching the creators themselves geeking over it is really heartwarming. You know what? I've decided to give my own contribution to the Future is Wild canon. This is Anakin, my blue-tongue skink named after Anakin Rizwalker. But don't let his adorable gaze fool you. This is a killing machine. He is so powerful and so big that he is no longer the apex predator, he is just the apex, single-handedly creating the mass extinction event that happened between the chapter 2 and 3. That is my headcanon. The Future is Wild is the perfect mix between entertainment and education, rolled perfectly in this edutainment blunt. However, it is obvious why it didn't have as many reprints as something like Walking with Dinosaurs. The visuals are clearly dated, and at times they can look pretty Sharknado adjacent. It is clear that it was not made with the high definition screens we have today in mind. After all, it was made in the early 2000s. At least to me, as someone who grew up in the early 2000s with a lot of 90s media, the dated visuals and tropes do add to its charm. Of course, I am referring to the translucent 3D models over a dark background with abstract text sounds. It looks like straight up something out of Minority Report. I love it, that's just the cherry on top. If you can look past the data visuals, I do encourage you to watch it. At least to me, it is one of the big 3, Walking with Dinosaurs, Dragons of Fantasy Made Real, and The Future is Wild. There's so much more that I didn't have the time to talk about in this video. I talked about the animals I liked the most, and the ones who I thought they were the funniest, but there's a lot more than what I talked about. This is the entire list of animals presented in The Future is Wild. Hey, give it a watch and leave it down there in the comments what you thought about it. Just, I don't know, if you think it sucks, just tell me down there, it's engagement. Despite it airing over 20 years ago, The Future is Wild is still somewhat an active brand, with a fairly active fan base. A few years after the documentary premiered, an animated show aimed at kids was also produced, but it cuts most of the science that made the documentary so interesting. Bear with me for a minute. Usually, I don't mind when animals talk in kids shows, believe me. I don't mind it at all. But here, it bothers me so damn much. I'm gonna get off script here for a minute. They present the animals in the animated show pretty much the same way they do in the documentary, as these incredible future species. However, in the documentary they present the animal, followed by a scientific explanation. But in the animated show they present the animals, followed by a sitcom scene of the animals interacting with each other, dropping the most unfunny jokes. I'm not joking, it is true. It annoyed me as a kid and it annoys me as an adult. This is The Future is Wild, not Big Bang Theory. That shit was 14 billion years ago. It's time to move on. I'm here for the animals. It takes them from these amazing future species to just annoying background characters that you wish for the next chapter for them to go extinct. However, the animated show did have something very positive. It got cancelled. Let's jump into the manga adaptation of The Future is Wild. Yeah, that's a thing. This is no joke. It is a real thing. It exists. Are you a real fan of The Future is Wild if you never read the manga? All my homies read it. What's your excuse, Michael? I'm starting to believe this is probably why girls avoided me at all costs in high school. You know, they would come up to me and be like, "Hey, John, how you doing?" I would go like, "Hey, babe, have you heard of The Future is Wild? It's about us too." They probably just thought I was so out of their league they would rather go with a jock from the basketball team. I was so cool back then. A few years ago, there were rumors floating around of a Future is Wild remake as well as a VR project, but I have no idea if those are still a thing. I would love to believe so, because Walking with Dinosaurs got a remake, so it's time for The Future is Wild to also have a remake. I am cautiously optimistic. I can't be the last fan of The Future is Wild still kicking. I'm not that old, okay? I'm not that old. Anyway, that's all I had to say for this video. Thank you so much for watching if you're still here, but I'll see you next time. It's gonna be cool, I promise. Do the roar. Do the roar, man. Oh, the poor guy. Okay.